I used to see a good-looking girl, and one minute I'd be thinking how nice it'd be to go out with her. And then the next instant I was thinking how nice her head would look on a stick. I think I have the ability to articulate what was going on inside me a lot better than a lot of other people, in a way that maybe people can understand. I don't think anybody doubts that I've done some bad things. The question is what, of course, and how, and maybe most importantly, why.
During the spring and summer of 1974, police in the Pacific Northwest were in a panic. Young women at colleges across Washington and Oregon were disappearing at an alarming rate, and law enforcement had few leads as to who was behind it. In just 6 months, 6 women had been abducted. Panic in the area reached a fever pitch when Janice Ann Ott and Denise Marie Naslund disappeared in broad daylight from a crowded beach at Lake Sammamish State Park. But the boldest of the abductions also yielded the first real break in the case. On the day Ott and Naslund vanished, several other women remembered being approached by a man who had tried and failed to lure them to his car. They told the authorities about an attractive young man with his arm in a sling. His vehicle was a brown Volkswagen Beetle, and the name he gave them was Ted. After releasing this description to the public, the police were contacted by 4 people who identified the same Seattle resident, Ted Bundy. These 4 people included Ted Bundy's ex-girlfriend, a close friend of his, one of his co-workers, and a psychology professor who had taught Bundy. But the police were inundated with tips, and they dismissed Ted Bundy as a suspect, thinking it unlikely that a clean-cut law student with no adult criminal record could be the perpetrator. He didn't fit the profile. These types of judgments benefited Ted Bundy many times throughout his murderous career as one of history's most infamous serial killers, which saw him take at least 30 victims across 7 states in the 1970s. For a time, he fooled everyone. The cops who didn't suspect him, the prison guards whose facilities he escaped from, the women he manipulated, the wife who married him after he was caught. But he was, as his final lawyer said, the very definition of heartless evil. As Ted Bundy himself once remarked, "I'm the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet."
My name is Ted Bundy. I've never spoken to anybody about this. I am looking for an opportunity to tell the story as best I can.
Ted Bundy, born in 1946 in Burlington, Vermont, seemed like an ordinary man, but beneath his charming exterior lurked a sinister monster. His rampage of violence spread across multiple states, leaving a nation in fear. As a child, there were no signs of the darkness that would later consume him. Bundy was an intelligent, charismatic young man, which he skillfully used to his advantage. Attending college, Bundy's charm became a potent weapon. He used his good looks and charisma to disarm his victims, gaining their trust and luring them into his trap. He often feigned injuries, wearing a cast or asking for help, creating an illusion of vulnerability that masked his true intentions. Ted Bundy graduated from high school in 1965, then enrolled in the nearby University of Puget Sound. He spent just 1 year there before transferring to the University of Washington to study Chinese. He dropped out briefly in 1968, but quickly re-enrolled as a psychology major. During his time out of school, he visited the East Coast, where he likely first learned that the woman he believed to be his sister was actually his mother. Then, back at UW, Bundy started dating Elizabeth Klopfer, a divorcee from Utah who worked as a secretary at the School of Medicine on campus. Later, Klopfer was among the first to report Bundy to police as a suspect in the Pacific Northwest murders. In 1973, Bundy was accepted into the University of Puget Sound Law School, but after a few months, he stopped attending classes. Then, in January of 1974, the disappearances began. Ted Bundy's first known attack was not an actual murder, but instead an assault on 18-year-old Karen Sparks, a student and dancer at the University of Washington. Bundy broke into her apartment and bludgeoned her unconscious with a metal rod from her bed frame before sexually assaulting her with the same object. His assault left her in a 10-day coma and with permanent disabilities. A month after his assault on Karen Sparks, Bundy broke into Healy's apartment in the early morning, knocked her unconscious, then clothed her body and carried her out to his car. She was never seen again, but part of her skull was discovered years later at one of the locations where Bundy dumped his bodies. Afterward, Bundy continued targeting female students in the area. He developed a technique, approaching women while wearing a cast or appearing otherwise disabled, and asking them to help him put something in his car. He would then bludgeon them unconscious before binding, raping, and killing them, dumping their bodies in a remote location in the woods. Bundy would often revisit these sites to have sex with their decaying corpses. In some cases, Bundy would decapitate his victims and keep their skulls in his apartment, sleeping beside his trophies. Over the next 5 months, Bundy abducted and murdered 5 female college students in the Pacific Northwest: Donna Gail Manson, Susan Elaine Rancourt, Roberta Kathleen Parks, Brenda Carroll Ball, and Georgian Hawkins. As the manhunt for the abductor continued, more witnesses produced descriptions that matched Ted Bundy and his car. Just as some of his victims' bodies were being discovered in the woods, Bundy was accepted to law school in Utah and moved to Salt Lake City. While living there, he continued to rape and murder young women, including a hitchhiker in Idaho and 4 teenage girls in Utah. Klopfer was aware that Bundy had relocated to the area, and on learning of the Utah murders, she called the police a second time to reaffirm her suspicion that Bundy was behind the killings. There was now a mounting pile of evidence pointing toward Ted Bundy, and when Washington investigators compiled their data, Bundy's name appeared at the top of the suspect list. Unaware of law enforcement's growing interest in him, Bundy continued killing, journeying to Colorado from his home in Utah to murder more young women there. Finally, in August 1975, Bundy was pulled over while driving through a Salt Lake City suburb, and police discovered masks, handcuffs, and blunt objects in the car. While this was not enough to arrest him, a police officer, realizing that Bundy was also a suspect in the earlier killings, put him under surveillance. The officers then found his Beetle, which he had since sold, where they discovered hair matching 3 of his victims. With this evidence, they put him in a lineup, where he was identified by one of the women whom he had attempted to abduct. He was convicted of kidnapping and assault and sent to prison while police attempted to build a murder case against him. But the arrest didn't stop Ted Bundy from killing. He was soon able to, for the first of 2 times in his life, escape from custody. In 1977, he escaped from the law library at the courthouse in Aspen, Colorado. Bundy's next escape took place just 6 months later, this time from a jail cell. On January 15, 1978, 2 weeks after his escape, Bundy broke into a Chi Omega sorority house on the Florida State University campus. Within the span of just 15 minutes, he sexually assaulted and killed Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, bludgeoning them with firewood and strangling them with stockings. He then assaulted Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, who both suffered horrific injuries, including broken jaws and missing teeth. He then broke into the apartment of Cheryl Thomas, who lived several blocks away, and beat her so badly that she lost her hearing permanently. Still, on the run on February 8th, Bundy abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach from her middle school and murdered her, concealing her body on a pig farm. And then, once again, his reckless driving caught the attention of the police. When they realized that his plates belonged on a stolen car, they pulled him over and found the IDs of 3 dead women in his vehicle, linking him to the FSU crimes. "I wish you had killed me," Bundy told the arresting officer. Bundy was ultimately convicted and placed on death row at Florida's Rayford Prison, where he suffered abuse from other prisoners, including a gang rape by 4 men, some sources say, and conceived a child with Carol Ann Boone, whom he'd married while he was on trial. Though he confessed to many murders before his death, the true number of Bundy's victims remains unknown. Bundy denied certain killings, despite physical evidence tying him to the crimes, and alluded to others that were never substantiated. Ultimately, all of this has led authorities to suspect Bundy killed anywhere from 30 to 40 women, making him one of the most infamous and terrifying serial killers in American history, and perhaps the very definition of heartless evil. Bundy was finally executed by an electric chair on January 24, 1989. Hundreds of people gathered outside the courthouse to celebrate his death. Ted Bundy's story is a chilling reminder of the evil that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary individuals. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the mind of Ted Bundy. If you found this episode informative, remember to give it a thumbs up and share it with your fellow true crime enthusiasts. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe. Take care.